unmuted and talking. Talking. There's Cody saying he's at the state fair. Well, that's got to be pretty interesting to be. I haven't gone to the state fair here in some time, but I always enjoyed them when I went.
7 years ago was one the last time I went.
Yeah.
I remember because it was when I was dating my wife, which I married her 7 years ago in February, so I know exactly the last time I went to the state fair.
Well, Cody, definitely enjoy the state fair. Maybe there's a riddle contest. No doubt there will probably be some sort of animal sculpted out of butter.
Butter.
Seems like there's always things like that at a state fair, right?
Yeah.
Which I'm okay with. Yeah, no, Cody, enjoy the fair. No worries. You can catch us when we have it posted here later in the week. All right, so we will go ahead and get started. Now, on your screen there, do you see what the screen is showing? And if so, does it look all fuzzy to you? Gotta make sure I'm not having a stroke here. I got it clear on my. Oh, okay, interesting. On the YouTube side of things, mine shows like it's all fuzzy looking, but whatever. As long as it looks good for everyone else. Yeah. So we'll go ahead and hit the intro real quick and get started on number 60 of Roundtables.
Ooh,
nice round number. All right, 1 second. We will hit the intro real quick and get started.
The Dark Tower by Stephen King. The man in black fled across the desert, and the gunslinger followed.
Go then. There are other worlds than these. Death, but not for you, gunslinger.
It's time we had our own palaver, I think, and it's going to take a while.
And yet, dauntless, the slug horn to my lips I set, and blew. Child Roland to the Dark Tower came.
We are quartet, one from many. Let the palaver begin.
Hello and welcome to Dark Tower Palaver. This is our podcast covering Stephen King's Magnum Opus, the Dark Tower series. My name is Tad.
and I'm Peter.
And we're here for roundtable number 60.
60 row.
That just seems weird. Like, even though we've been like up in the high 50s and stuff, like saying 60 suddenly sounds weird to me.
It's finally starting to make it more real that, oh my gosh, we're going to have 100th roundtable soon.
Relative soon.
Well, relative soon, but still.
A couple years to get to where we're at. And that includes like a lot of heavy roundtable. Like now with our normal patterning, it'll take a lot longer because we were doing a lot of roundtables there for movie stuff. So
100 seems a lot more likely now than it did before. Like even when we hit 50, it's like, 50, that's cute.
Yeah,
100 is like, geez, we're only 40 roundtables away from 100.
It'd be interesting to see what our total count is for episodes. I still haven't done that yet to merge together.
Oh yeah,
like the book clubs and stuff like that. So yeah, we're getting up there though. Yeah, I don't know why 60 just sounds weird. I think it's one of those like when you're aging, it's like 29's fine, but once you hit 30, you're like, oh wow, I am now a decade older.
Oh geez, yeah,
yeah, it seems weird to say 60, but yeah, here we are for roundtable number 60.
So you've done one Unfound Door, correct?
I think I've done 2. I thought I did The Shining, didn't I?
I don't think you ever did The Shining. Oh, no, you did.
Yeah, I thought
you
I
finally
did
The Shining. Okay.
Yeah, it took me a bit.
So we have 76 episodes.
Oh, okay.
Because the Podcast Addicts has a count for how many shows.
Yeah.
It says we have 78.
And we don't time ours out. So we're probably about 75-ish, because there was a couple times I did some like announcements via the podcast feed just to let people know about some stuff. So yeah, we're probably right around 75 for all-time episodes, most likely, because I feel like I've done that at least 2 or 3 times. So,
I gotcha.
Approximately, yeah. At some point I'll go in and delete those, and then we'll actually have a count on the podcasting apps. So.
There you go.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and get into our intros real quick, and then we will get into the normal routine of everything, news and emails and that kind of stuff, and a little bit of programming about what our next episode is going to be, because it's going to be a little bit different. If you are following us on Twitter, you already know a little bit. I did forget to do it on Facebook. I apologize about that. That's I don't know why I spaced. I think I just like tweeted it. It was just one of those things I just tweeted like really quick as I was like in the middle of.
You're like, you know what? I should tweet this, and then I'll tell Peter about it and just forget about Facebook.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I definitely tweeted it before I told you about it.
Of course you did.
I tweet
that's the way Ted works. It's like, hey Peter, we're doing this. Okay.
I tweet from the hip. Is what we'll say.
You're a tweet singer, no slinger. Tweet slinger?
That doesn't sound like
tweet slinger.
That sounds like something like Tweety Bird type thing. That sounds
like word slinger, but tweet slinger.
Yeah, that just doesn't sound manly. It sounds like someone would have like a tiny little like shooter, like 6-shooter that's like the size for Tweety Bird, and he's just like I don't know. It just seems like something silly you'd see in a cartoon. So it just seems super like just silly. I don't know. I love the spirit of it though. Okay, so first off, I want to warn you guys about spoilers. If you guys are new, especially this introduction element might be good information for you. If you've been around for a while, you probably could recite it by memory, unless you just skip ahead on it because you've heard it a million times. The first thing I want to do is warn you about spoilers. If you have not finished at least the 7 primary books of the Dark Tower series, you may want to cry off this episode and stick to our book club episodes. In those episodes, we stay where we are at in the series and go no further. So those are, as much as we can be spoiler free, insofar as you're not further behind than our episodes are. But if you keep pace with our episodes, you'll never get spoiled in the book clubs. However, on the roundtables, honestly, it's very rare that we don't happen upon things like the ending of characters, or like their resolution in the story. We come across those things quite a bit. So if you haven't finished it, going forward, if you go forward with listening to this episode, you take the being spoiled into your own hands. It is no longer on our hands now after that warning.
You can still blame Ted if you want. I'm okay with that.
I say blame you.
Nah.
Yeah. Because it's never me that brings up the death of these characters. It's always you. You're such a terrible person.
You always bring them up. You do it as a jab to get me every time.
That's not how I remember it.
Of course.
Okay, so next up is how you guys can find the podcast. Like if you were perhaps listening on YouTube and wanted to find our back episodes or that kind of thing, you can find us on any podcast service, including iTunes. You can stream us on Stitcher and any podcast service out there. Everyone seems to have a favorite, and they all basically draw from the same database, so you should be able to find us on anything. If you do find a podcast service that you're using that you can't find us on, let us know. We'll try to get on there, with the exception of Spotify, which is a little bit tougher to get into. You have to pretty much be, I don't know, like you have to check all these boxes off of things. You jump through a lot of hoops to get it approved there. So that's the only one I'll say we'll try, but I haven't really started that process yet. But I know it's fairly, from the podcasting things I'm involved with, like podcasting groups and stuff, I know that one's kind of tough to get into, even for like ones that seemingly should be a no-brainer for them. So except for there, if you can't find us, let us know on any of the podcast services. Also, if you could be so kind as to subscribe, rate, and review our show. You can do that on any of those things like Stitcher. A lot of these third-party podcast services have rating systems as well, but the big one is iTunes. If you could subscribe to us, rate us, and review us, the ratings and reviews are definitely some of the biggest things. Those drive a lot of people to, like, because that'll be the difference between on iTunes being like a trending podcast and not, and that obviously would always find more listeners, which we're always looking for. We always want to make our content bigger, because we are a member. You guys, if you're listening, are now a member of the extended content, and as part of that, Peter can tell you what that entails.
All right, so if you want to reach out to us, you can do it through email. It's darktowerpalaver@gmail.com. We also have Facebook. It's facebook.com/darktowerpalaver. And then you can follow us on the Twitter. It's @DarkTowerPod. That's @DarkTowerPod. We stream our shows on YouTube. It's youtube.com/DarkTowerPalaver. You can follow along with the slides and pictures and everything that Tad is showing me. You can also check out older episodes that we have on there now. So check them out.
Yeah, indeed. And yeah, we didn't get much of a heads up. Now, this is for a programming note. This is going to be our last episode that is a little bit later in the evening for us. If you're East Coast, this is going to be late in the night, actually, because you're talking like 8, 9 o'clock was when it's about the time it is now, East Coast. So we will be back to a couple weeks ago. We had some episodes that were, if you're one that has been following us live, a few weeks ago we had some that were a little bit earlier. We're going to be going to that more permanently, as I understand it. Is that correct, Peter?
Saturday.
So
this is my last Saturday working the later shifts. As of next week, I will be off at 2:30 Mountain Time, which is 4:30 Eastern.
Yeah.
So that's about the time that we will be starting. What we did last time or the time before? I'm trying to remember which.
Yeah, it was a couple episodes back, I think.
Yeah,
last time we were.
ago.
Yeah, last with the book club, we were
regular time.
Regular time, yeah.
So the time before that, where we were a little bit earlier, that's what we're going to be looking at going forward for our regular time on the show, because now I will have an earlier shift on the weekends.
Yeah, so be looking forward to that. We did mention a few episodes back about having some more regularity with our time. I mean, I think this has generally been our regular time more recently, so but I don't think that it's necessarily the most convenient for everyone. But with those times, if you can make it to our live shows, we'd always love for you guys to be a part of those. It's always fun to have the live. Like I actually, it's funny. I have some podcasts to listen to that have like live things like that, and they always call it like the one podcast I listen to calls it like the Zoo Crew. And yeah, that's. But no, we always love having people live because it's always fun to interact with people as we're going. But if not, we're always you can always interact with us through like the email and stuff like that. And next up, we want to let you guys know before jumping in too far as well is next episode is going to be a little bit of a different episode. I don't know. I mean, Peter, actually, you brought it up and I haven't been able to shake it. Is the idea is maybe we should consider it an Unfound Door episode. But
no, you made a valid point that Roundtable can definitely be used for this.
Yeah, it's true. So next episode in a couple weeks here, we're actually going to pretty much. I don't want to say entirely and solely, but probably one of the biggest main courses of that episode will be discussing Castle Rock from the beginning to the end. Not necessarily, I don't know how deep in the weeds we'll necessarily get, but we want to look at it kind of like I do in my Unfound Door episodes through the paradigm of Dark Tower fans and where it fits into the larger Stephen King universe. If you're familiar with my Unfound Door episodes, I generally say, even if it's not something super obvious like Father Callahan, like The Shining, for instance, I spent some time talking in The Shining about connections to the Dark Tower when most fans would probably sit there. If you're reading through an extensive list of Dark Tower connections, The Shining's probably not going to show up on there. So sometimes it's just me extrapolating like how things might fit in. Things like, for instance, Danny being a breaker. He would probably be one of the more powerful breakers.
Yeah, that he has the touch.
Because he has the touch, which is the shine, that kind of stuff. So like things like that, like seeing how things connect and how they might fit into the larger Dark Tower world, even if it isn't as obvious as something, like I said, like Salem's Lot would be a big one where it's like obvious, but so we'll do the kind of the similar thing with Castle Rock next week or next episode. So be ready for that. So I guess the main warning is if you haven't watched the show yet, the next episode will be a big spoiler warning for you on that, which we don't generally do. I don't know if we've ever done that before where we've
not for anything outside of Dark Tower.
Yeah, like whether it be movies. I mean. Books, because even like when we kind of nerded out about things like The Outsider in our roundtable, it's like a side thing. We still haven't done like a Unfound Door on that, but when we talked about things like that, or we've talked about like the movie, I can't really say that we went too deep into. I mean, I don't know how you feel with it because like I feel like most people listening hopefully had read the books, so they kind of knew what they were getting themselves into. Talk about the movie, because
I think we went a little bit into the movie, if I remember right, where we were looking at certain aspects of the movie and we talked about it, but that was well after it had come out and everyone had a chance to see it, and we kind of gave a little bit of a warning, but it wasn't anything in depth.
You're talking about when we were comparing the Dark Tower and it. What I'm talking about is like when the first weekend it came out. Remember, we had some people on the live chat or something that started asking us about different things, and it kind of just turned into like it turned into a whole tangential 20-minute talk on the movie, and maybe we spoiled a little bit there, but in general we haven't gone as hardcore with spoiler territory on stuff outside of the Dark Tower series. So it's just we wanted to give you guys a fair warning for next episode that if you haven't watched Castle Rock yet, or if you haven't finished it yet, it would be good to maybe skip that episode and come back to it when you have finished the show, because we want to get in and dive into it. And Peter, I think you're still a little bit behind, right?
Yeah, I got a couple more episodes to get caught up.
Okay, yeah, and then also the great thing too is that does give us time also for the last episode to air.
Yep.
So episode 10 airs in a couple days, about the time that the podcast gets posted. So if you're listening to the podcast, chances are, unless I posted it early, you're either you probably could jump on Hulu and watch the last episode right now, or in a couple days if I post out like on Monday or Tuesday. It's getting a little bit more where sometimes I'm posting it earlier, but a lot of times I post it late Tuesday night. So Wednesday morning for most people. Yeah, it would be available. So be aware of that and be ready to talk some Castle Rock. And you can join us in the live chat if you have finished the show and want to join in the conversation. I honestly feel, just to give tip my hand a little bit, I feel like it's right in the vein of, even though it's not like official Stephen, like I don't know how much involvement Stephen King had, but I feel like it fits right into like things like The Outsider and 11/22/63, because like honestly I've adored it. I actually think I liked it more than 11/22/63 miniseries.
Wow.
I mean, I'm not going to probably go any further to like start comparing it to like things like It and stuff that came out more recently.
Let's save this for next
week.
Well,
I'm just saying that like I'm at least want to let people know I'm really digging it. So if you haven't given it the chance yet, I would highly suggest doing it because it's been really good. So definitely check it out if you haven't yet. You got plenty of time. You got like another weekend to binge between now and our next episode. So,
and that's the nice thing, is now that I have a couple episodes backed up, I can watch more than one at once. So
yeah,
that's something that I was a little worried at first as to how I would do week to week. I did it just fine with 11/22/63. I mean, like, I knew the story, I knew what was going to happen.
Yeah,
I didn't know how they were going to do it, and what they were going to change, but kind of knew the story. This one is completely original, and it's got a really intriguing story. I'm really excited to talk about this. When you brought this up the other day, and you're like, "Hey man, I got an idea for our show next week and next roundtable," and it's a little bit different. I was like, "Uh-oh, great. Okay, so here's where Tad's going to make some changes on us. We're going to do something really off kilter or something."
I mean, it kind of is.
And then he's like, and then you said, "No, I really think we should finish Castle Rock, and then I think we should talk about it." I was like, "Dude, sign me up. I'm there."
Yeah. So where are you at episode wise? Just out of curiosity, in terms of like, because like to me there was a point when early on I was hyped, and then there was like kind of the midpoint that I didn't necessarily get down on the show, but I think that like waiting on it kind of was like bumming me out a tiny bit, so I kind of slowed down to where I was able to finally watch a couple episodes at a time instead of watching them as they came out.
I am on episode 5.
Okay.
So I've seen 4 episodes.
Okay, because that's about the time I think I was just starting to get bummed out to where I was like watching. I'm like, damn it, I got another week to wait for the show again.
Yeah.
And I just like slowed down to where I think by the time I watched like 5, 6, 7, somewhere in that realm, or no, it was probably like 5 or 6, maybe, yeah, somewhere in there is where like I was able to watch a couple at a time, and it improved my. I don't know. I'm like hit or miss on binging versus waiting, because like sometimes I really love the time to just digest a show, but other times I'm just like, when I binge like a show after the fact, like on Netflix or whatever it might be, there's just times that like I feel it benefits the show a little bit because I have more, because like it's not like a month in the past something that like they might come back and reference, like Stranger Things or whatever. It's like if I'm sitting and watching that in 1 or 2 sittings, it's like, okay, I remember what happened in episode 1 because that was only 5 hours ago.
Yeah, Game of Thrones is really a big one for me with referencing thing.
Yeah,
where they throw back to the things. They always have that little startup at the beginning of the episode.
Yeah,
and I kind of commented to my wife during last season. I was like, you always know what the episode of Game of Thrones is going to be about because they always do the previously on Game of Thrones.
They did mess with people though. There was a certain episode that was a season finale that a certain character was told about another character. Yeah. And in the previously on, they showed the character that was part of the elaborate ruse, as it were. Yeah. So it actually threw viewers off because they actually thought that. So I really found that clever that from the showrunner's perspective that they used the flashback thing to trick audiences into something.
After 6 years, they finally realized, oh, they're on to us. We got to throw them off.
Because that's the kind of thing I would do. Like if I was doing a show, I would totally do something to mess with people like that, just to like, because ultimately it is like you want as a storyteller probably to let people, like just like Stephen King with his arguments for the Dark Tower books, like with those, as you read through them, they're different from one book to the next, obviously, right? Because he's covered not just, so like if you reading book 3 or 4, the argument's way different than it was for 2, because it's like covering way more books, but also you kind of notice that he is focusing on things that he knows he's going to touch on in the upcoming novel, or maybe he's writing after the fact, so he kind of knows that like so going into book 3, he really leans on the Jake thing heavier than he did in like book 2, because Jake doesn't mean anything for book 2,
right?
So like it's the same thing, so it's kind of interesting. It's a similar thing that King's done with the arguments. But it's funny, I actually hit someone up on Reddit recently, because it was on the books subreddit, and somebody mentioned, I think they mentioned, I can't remember what book, maybe it was 11/22/63, and then in the comments it started talking about Dark Tower for some reason. Someone talked about just not being able to get into it and stuff, or maybe it was a subreddit or a thread about not being able to get through books or something. But either way, somebody brought up Dark Tower, and I told them, I'm like, you know what, I run a podcast for Dark Tower. I'm like, there's a number of listeners now that have said that either by hook or by crook they ended up with book 2 first, and I said with the argument at the beginning, you don't really miss a beat, and I said I have yet to hear somebody that did that wasn't instantly hooked in. And I told him, I said, I struggled through the first book, and by the time I got to the second, that's what really sold me on the series. So I told him, I said, dude, next time you try to pick it up, if you do, and I said, please do, pick up book 2, start there, and go from there. Like, just see what happens. So I don't know. I just found that interesting, because we talked about that not too long ago.
We did.
There was someone that bought the second book, was it?
Yeah, someone started with the second book, and I thought it was really interesting that was where they started the saga with the argument. You make a valid point. King recaps really well to cover the points that are important.
Yeah.
Obviously Jake dropping and stuff like that. Really important stuff and everything. And then to start with book 2 is really interesting, because I was the same as you. I was reading book 1. I kept walking up to you in high school going, dude, what the fuck are you having me read, man? Like, this is really weird. Like, this is not the normal Tad stuff that Tad usually drops on me.
Or normal Stephen King, because you had some exposure to him by that point. I had
some exposure by that point.
It just it doesn't jive as much. I think it just comes from probably when it was written, but in terms of in his age and stuff, right? Like, he was still pretty green around the ears or whatever. What's the phrasing? Is it green around the ears? That doesn't sound right to me.
No.
Either way,
he was a rookie.
Yeah, he was a greenhorn, and when he wrote it, because I mean, I think in general it's accepted he wrote it around 1970. Yeah, but it came out in 82 when it was published in its entire form as a book. Obviously, the men's magazines earlier, but yeah. So you're talking about a way younger King than he was in 87 when he starts writing book 2.
Right.
So yeah, that's I just found that I
think we went back and looked at it, and you still have your list of Stephen King's works by chronological order, right?
Yeah.
There's I think we did this one time off the air, and I kind of wanted to bring it back since we're talking about it. There were some big books between 76 when Carrie came out.
Carrie 74.
74. Okay, so the movie came out in 76. That's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
So Carrie came out in 74, but there's some big hitters between 74 and 87 that King got under his belt before he
gets into book 2.
Before he gets into book 2.
Yeah, we got, from Carrie, which was a big hit, obviously. Salem's Lot, The Shining, Rage, Night Shift, The Stand, Long Walk, The Dead Zone, Firestarter, Roadwork, Dan's Macabre, Cujo, The Running Man, The Gunslinger. Not that he wrote that at that point, but that's when he put it out there in 82. Different Seasons, Christine's, Cycle of a Werewolf, Pet Sematary, Eye of the Dragon, The Talisman, Thinner, Skeleton Crew, It, and then Drawing of the Three in 87. So
he said
most of the golden age, the first golden age of King
was right there.
Was in the books by the time that book came out. So it certainly falls more in the realm of like what people expect from Stephen King.
Yeah.
Like if he's a brand.
If you just had to pick 3 of those books, having them under his belt before writing Drawing the Three, the 3 that I would focus on are It, The Stand, and Pet Sematary.
I had my cursor on Pet Sematary.
The reason why I would say Pet Sematary is because I think it's the argument that it's the end of book 7 where he's talking about different books and writing and everything like that, where he says like, oh, I just finished a doozy of a book. It'll never see the light of day. Pet Sematary is just too dark. And then it comes back 3 months later. Well, published Pet Sematary. It's the end of my career now, or something like that.
Oh, is that the diary section?
Yeah, the little diary section of book 7.
Yeah,
and it's just like Yeah, it's where he is. He's man. I think I need to go back to the Dark Tower series again. I hear the call of the turtle.
You're talking in universe of the book,
in universe of the book,
not like the epilogue or anything.
No. But it's like it's just it always cracks me up that he talks about Pet Sematary so clearly because, and he said it before publicly, is that he honestly believed that book would end his career because it was just so bad. It was so dark and everything, and it's just too much for a book and for a novelist and everything like that. So I think that having those 3 books under his belt before writing the drawing of the 3, that was eye-opening when we talked about that. It was a few months ago when we brought that up because we were talking about you going through chronologically. Yeah. It's just like, man, there's a lot of books before book 2 even gets put out.
Yeah.
That he nailed them. I mean, The Stand, Christine.
Yeah.
All these great books and everything like that. Having that
and
under
the
his
big
belt.
cornerstones, The Stand and It.
Oh,
I mean, those are like your foundational Stephen King works in a lot of ways. I mean, you can argue also Carrie and Salem's Lot and The Shining. Like, you can argue any of those, but I feel like if nothing else, the size and girth of The Stand and It, and just like the fact that generally speaking, probably most constant readers would point to those as like seminal works and ones that most of us read maybe repeatedly. You know what I mean?
You go back 2 years before it came out and you walk up to someone and say, hey, do you know Stephen King? Well, no, not really. Can you name one of his novels? Oh, yeah, he wrote The Stand. Oh, yeah, he wrote It.
Yeah,
because of the Pennywise miniseries, and Tim Curry was a clown.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, right. What about the one with the dog? All those ones that people know him for are from that era right there.
Yeah, exactly. All the stuff he's known for, like the haunted car, the killer clown,
the vampire one.
Yeah, like vampire, like The Shining, obviously, probably. I mean, easily, even though he doesn't like it, obviously, and we as readers know why he doesn't like it. But that's probably the greatest movie that will probably ever come from his works. In terms of like, it's considered one of the greatest horror movies of all time.
No, Shawshank Redemption, sir. Sorry, no.
Here's the thing: Shawshank is in a crowded genre. It's in drama. It's really hard to gain footing in there because there's so many great dramas. Like horror though, like top 3, hardly anyone that's going to list a top 3 horror movies that doesn't include that. Whereas top 3 for dramas, you're going to get people that go Citizen Kane, Godfather.
But consistently, you see people list Shawshank as number 1. Like, you go look at like number of lists across the board. Shawshank Redemption is a top 5 movie, not drama, movie across the board. I gotta go with Shawshank, man.
If I'm going to give the edge to The Shining, it would be, if nothing else, then iconic. It's way more iconic than Shawshank. Shawshank may be well loved and stuff, but it doesn't have that same iconic. Like, I mean, think about like Twister when they're at the drive-in and it's playing The Shining. Think about how many spoofs have we seen of The Shining? How many times have we seen the twins referenced? I mean, I think there's been at least 3 or 4 movies I've seen that show the twin scene in the movie within the movie, or like I think I didn't even watch it, but that's the new Spielberg movie that just came out with the virtual reality world.
Ready Player One.
Yeah, Ready Player One had a huge Shining thing.
Did it?
I haven't even seen it, but I've heard enough about to know that it was like one of the best like references in the whole thing. Is the so it's just one of those. If nothing else, it's more iconic. It's a
there's a difference between being like a pop culture icon like that and everything, and
that usually comes from greatness, right?
And being recognized as a better film. It's a different ball game. And the one thing that we've always talked about is. You hate it when I say, hey, Ted, what's your top 5 movies of all time? You go, okay, give me a genre. It can go back to that. Is The Shining one of the best horror movies ever made based off of a Stephen King work? I'd even debate that with, It.
Oh, I don't know.
It versus The Shining?
I mean, in terms of like, if you're going to grade it based on the King work that it's based off of?
Movie alone. Because, dude, we loved the It movie.
Oh, yeah,
we both did.
But at the same time, like, it's like one of those, like, it could be one of those, like, what's new and shiny type thing versus, like, The Shining, we could almost recite that movie line to line. I mean, I certainly can. I've watched it a million times, but I still love it. I don't know. It still gets me, Inside that room is no bueno. No bueno.
You want to go stay there.
Well, the real hotel that was based off of. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I think the reservations for room 217 are like a year out in advance.
So you have a couple lists on things that have waiting lists for you. You got Green Bay Packers. You got this, and
I'm too old for Packers waiting list. That's like a 60-year waiting list. 60 years from now, I'd be either an old man or long dead in the ground there. Oh man, yeah. So I don't know. It's definitely a good debate though, and I think it could be had for sure. But I would say if nothing else, like, I mean, and also somewhat you're going to get a lot of people that would like look at The Shining also because Kubrick being one of the greater filmmakers of the more modern era. Modern, I guess. Like I was like this
it's
side
starting to not be modern.
Well,
dude.
this side of like the Hitchcock era of like like the 40s and 50s golden era, like the more modern like. Whatever, like, like I think it's definitely up. Like he's one of the more beloved filmmakers, so that helps quite a bit. But I think that's a good debate to have, and who knows what we're going to get here in the future. That's what I'm curious about. I just saw not too long ago they cast Abra in Doctor Sleep.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, so they got that cast.
Ewan McGregor, man.
Yeah, Ewan McGregor. I'm trying to think of anything else like in the newer realm. I still want a Shining remake, man. Not the remake of the movie. I want just a straight adaptation in the modern styles to see what happens. Just like we're getting Pet Sematary, which I don't think anyone really dogs Pet Sematary for the movie. I think everyone enjoys it. It's not necessarily what the book is, but it's still a great movie.
Yeah.
But Andy Muschietti that did it, chapters 1 and 2, going to do Pet Sematary. That. Yeah, I sign me up.
I've only read part of the book and still.
Oh man, yeah, it's actually never really. I think we talked about it off mic, but it is interesting to look at from book 2 previous is basically the entire golden era. Like literally, it was the one that was published the year before Drawing of the Three. So chances are he put the pen down for it and started writing Drawing of the Three next.
Or you never know. He may have been writing in between all of those, a little bit here, a little bit there. Just finally got back into it all the way after it was done. But I tell you that era between 74 and 86, that's a damn good era for King books.
Yeah, it is. As I keep I'm running up and down the list. I mean, things like even Cujo that would probably it's like one of those ones I feel like is like great, but tends to get forgotten. Like if you're listing great King books, like Cujo and Christine seem to me to be ones that tend to get forgotten, not because people don't like them, but because it's like one of those you don't think of in the same way. Like It in The Stand, that comes to mind instantly. Carrie, Salem's Lot, The Shining, those comes to mind instantly. But like Cujo and Christine, for some reason, they're not tip of the tongue. They're not like right off the tongue. They're always ones that are like, oh yeah, I forgot about that one. Like it happens to me too. I do it all the time.
And of course, it has the St. Bernard. So I mean, who doesn't love Cujo?
Freaking beast.
I love it. I want to St. Bernard so bad, dude.
Oh, and then that's interesting because then right after Drawing of the Three was Misery. So it's kind of interesting there because that's in terms of like because then I think then after that you start to get into I'd say the less iconic era. Like after Misery, then you got Tommy Knockers, The Dark Half, 4 Past Midnight, and then Wasteland. So that's a pretty quick turnaround to that. But that's like, and then you're getting to like Needful Things, Gerald's Game, Dolores Claiborne, Nightmare and Dreamscapes, Insomnia, Rose Madder, Green Mile, Desperation, The Regulators, and then Wizard and Glass. So like I would say that's like not that those are bad books, but it certainly isn't the golden age. That's kind of the middle era between the first golden age and the second golden age that we're in the middle of now.
You take the best book in either one of those eras right there and compare it against Firestarter or Cujo or Christine. It's going to be a close call. I mean, that's not even pulling out the heavy hitters like The Shining, The Stand, Salem's Lot, or It. I mean,
yeah, and then it just since we've gone through it now, like then from Wizard and Glass, you got Bag of Bones, A Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon, Hearts and Atlantis, Storm of the Century, On Writing, which definitely the nonfiction realm, Dark Dreamcatcher, Black House, Everything's Eventual from Rebuke 8, and then the 3 Dark Tower books. There,
boom,
just one after another, obviously, and then you kind of get into like a few transitional ones. And I think where he's kind of working through the accident still. Faithful, The Colorado Kid, Cell, Lizzie Story, and then Blaze, Doom Key, Just After Sunset, then Under the Dome. I feel like. Well, Under the Dome. I feel like Under the Dome doesn't necessarily fall into the. I don't know if it falls into the realm of the new golden era. Like, because I mean, obviously, we're just inventing this phrase, right? We kind of.
I think it started it.
I feel like if not that it was necessarily part of that, because I feel like I enjoyed that one a lot. Obviously, like the third act was like a little bit
weird.
Yeah, like maybe I don't know. I enjoyed the first 2/3 more than the second or the last third, but I still enjoyed it, and I feel like that's kind of what got me kind of primed on King again. So yeah, in a way, if nothing else, personally for me, that's when it kind of got me back into like, okay, yeah, and then from there you're talking a Blockade Billy, Full Dark No Stars in 11/22/63, then went through the Keyhole, Joyland, The Dark Man, Doctor Sleep, Mr. Mercedes, Revival, Finders Keepers, The Bazaar of Bad Dreams, and End of Watch. So yeah, that's like puts us right into this new. So it's interesting to see kind of where it falls. But yeah, I mean, you're talking pretty much the entirety of the first golden era was before Drawing of the Three. So it's an interesting to think about. So and honestly, most people would rank 2 as one of the best of this series, so that falls right into that golden era.
Right in there. You know, if you look at the golden era, maybe not ending with Drawing of the Three, but I mean, look at a couple books after Drawing of the Three. You said Misery came right after it.
Yeah.
And then, just looking maybe Misery was the tailing off point. I mean,
which is the one that he was not going to he was going to publish that as a Bachman novel.
Yeah.
I remember last time I read that, that kind of jumped out at me in his foreword or afterword or whatever it was. He said, I was originally going to publish this as he said it. I think that was the one. He said, because it's just like one of the, even though it's weird to me, I'm like, I think that would have given him away. I don't remember how many more years until he finally got exposed for that, but I feel
he got exposed before The Long Walk. I got corrected by a fan on that when I was talking about it a few episodes back. Is that he got exposed but kept writing under it while kind of denying it, but it'd come out that he was.
There was definitely suspicion, but I think that one was one that just feels way too kingy to me. Even though it's not supernatural, it's just so. I don't know.
Creepy?
I would honestly say even if Bachman was invented the year of Drawing of the Three and then he rolled it out for Misery #1, I honestly think people would have seen through it. It's way too, in my mind, it's way too kingy. And I have the hindsight 2020, but there's part of me that's like, okay, some of the others you might be able to get away with, but Misery, that one's just way too you.
Right.
To me it is anyway. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a interesting.
I always forget that Doomakey came out so late. I always thought that it came out a little bit sooner. I thought it was one of the Bachman ones. So, that's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting to see how it all breaks out for sure, and it'd be interesting to break it into eras in terms of like how would you break, like would you define certain eras in other ways outside of like, I know we're doing more sweepingly saying these 2 golden eras. But
I'd honestly say the golden era ended with the first golden era ended with Drawing of the Three. I'd say that's where that golden era, man, everything before that is just like, whew, man. I mean, obviously I haven't read everything. Yeah. I haven't read Rage.
It's a murder's row though. If it comes down to it, it's murder's row for King as that first block there from 74 through 87.
Yeah, the first 13 years are just they're killer. Years for King novels. After that, I'd be like, I honestly would just lump everything in until the accident 2004 with the releasing of the 3 Dark Towers. I'd put the 3 Dark Towers all the way back to the novel probably right after Misery. I'd put all those into the second era of King.
Yeah,
I'd call that the TV era. The movie and TV era.
Well, because that's the era that he was like writing a screenplay and he was working with.
He directed a movie.
George Romero, and like he was doing a lot to where it was like, I don't think writing was his first and foremost. I'm not saying that to like deride anything written in that era. I'm just saying that I don't think that writing novels was his only focus. There was a lot going on, and
he directed a movie during that time, right? Maximum Overdrive was directed by Stephen King.
Yeah.
So I mean, he directed a movie. He wrote a screenplay. He participated in a
number of things in that
Creep
era.
Show. He played a part in one of the stories there, and
that's like he and Romero did that.
Yeah, he did a bunch of other things there as well during that time frame. And then he had his accident and started writing again. And I think it took a little bit, but I really think that Under the Dome kicked off the new golden era of King. I haven't read the earlier stuff there. Maybe I should go back and read some of that stuff.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to go through and read it, but I'd be curious.
Between Under the Dome and 11/22/63, I think you said 2 or 3 novels right there.
Yeah. Because what's interesting is my mom is a huge Stephen King fan. I feel like that's probably where I got it from, and she always said that after the accident, she was never able to get into his stuff. She felt his writing style changed drastically in a way that she wasn't able to really jive with the stuff past that. She never got into the Dark Tower stuff, but then she just, like some of those other ones that came out around that time, like Faithful, the Colorado Kid, it was probably what she's talking about, that she just couldn't get into. I remember like Dreamcatchers a little bit before the accident, and she really enjoyed that book and the movie as well. But like, so it's kind of funny that like the accident is something, but it would be interesting, with the Unfound Door thing, when I get into that era, those ones outside of the Dark Tower series, to find, what are those like? How is he dealing through the accident, through his writing, things like that. And here's something to think about. Now it would be torturous. What if the Dark Tower series didn't get finished then? Well, let's say he only wrote Wolves of the Call at that time, and the other two came out here in the 11/22/63 era. Do you feel the books would be similar? Do you feel that, I mean, it all comes down to like, does the exterior forces of his life influence his writing? Do you feel it'd be the same story? Do you think that like in book 7 they'd be going out to save King had it been more time removed from the accident?
Probably not, and I think we may have ended on a little bit happier note, because looking at the stuff from Under the Dome on that I've read, there's not a lot of King endings where it's just like, oh, the kid died in Cujo. Spoiler alert.
I'd say 11/22/63, but the only problem there is that his son helped him with the ending.
That's true.
So I feel like, how much do we credit with King, and how much do you credit his son?
There's a theory for you. King only puts out Wolves of the Call and then continues writing songs as is in the Dark Tower. Imagine if his boys got in on it with him.
I mean, honestly, I told you before, like, I read Nosferatu, and dude, like, I think I told you, like, there's a number of times I forgot I wasn't reading King. It was stylistically very similar, but also, dude, he drops Dark Tower stuff in his book.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, okay, like
all right, that's canon.
Yeah, like,
that's there.
The bloodline, right? The bloodline of King. They can go ahead and dabble whatever they want in the Dark Tower realm.
Well, you know what, Ted? Let's make an executive decision here at Dark Tower Palaver. We'll allow it.
Yeah, we'll allow it. At some point, you still got to read some of his stuff. I do. I bought that one, and I think I can't remember the name of it now. It's something with firefighters. But I bought both of them when I was going to Mexico for a vacation, and I ended up getting through Nosferatu, but I haven't even started the other book yet.
It's Joe Hill, right?
Yeah, Joe Hill. So it was definitely. I'm interested to read more Joe Hill for sure. But yeah, it would be interesting if he had shared something with Dark Tower with his kids, and then who knows? Like, would we even have Wind Through the Keyhole at this point?
Yeah.
I wonder, was that like? Would that be the Call of the Turtle? It wasn't for the accident. Would that have been when Book 6 came out? Is in 2012 when Book 8 came out eventually. Like I said, it'd be torturous. And I mean, who knows, dude? We might even be at a spot that we had 6 of the books right now, but we don't.
We'd be talking about this. We'd be talking about when the 7th book is going to come out.
Yeah, like
who's worse, George R. Martin or Stephen King?
And like with R.R. Martin, like, it's him. He just doesn't seem to write very quickly. Whereas King would be like, yeah, he's writing plenty, but he's not writing Dark Tower. He's writing other books.
Stop putting out all these other freaking books.
Now, would that affect our enjoyment of things like the Bill Hodges trilogy and maybe even 11/22/63?
Probably a little bit.
Not necessarily because they're bad books, but because we're pissed that they're not Dark Tower. Would those give us somewhat of a bias going in?
I'm sure that some fans from the old era, where they were reading along as he was publishing the books, could probably tell us how
that's a good
feels.
question. Yeah, if anyone was more real time and had to wait through some of the books, do you feel, if you ever thought about it? If not, think about it now and maybe email us. Did your enjoyment of any of the books that came out in the subsequent periods between the books, were they affected by the fact that you were mad that they were not Dark Tower books? Something like, I'm kind of looking at the list here. So drawing of the 3
Tommyknockers.
Yeah, like, I mean, Misery was right after. So yeah, Tommyknockers not far. I mean, Wastelands came so quick afterwards. I'd say that between Wastelands and Wizard and Glass is a bigger one. So things like Needful Things, Gerald's Game, Dolores Claiborne, Insomnia, The Green Mile, were any of those things affected by the fact that you wanted, especially Wizard and Glass, because that's the end of the. So yeah, when you think about that, it's from 87, and he only waits till 91 before the next one comes out. But then from there, it's 97, so 6 years.
So in those 6 years, while waiting for the cliffhanger to be resolved, when you're reading what, like Tommy Knockers in between there.
Yeah, were you like Needful Things, Gerald's Game, Dolores Claiborne, Insomnia, Green Mile? Were any of those things? Were any of those books in your mind? Now that you could think about it, maybe having hindsight of 2020.
Yeah.
Do you think that any of those were maybe affected? Did you maybe not care for them as much at the time, but now in retrospect, like you enjoy those books, but maybe it was like, I don't know. It's an interesting question. Anyone out there, let us know on the email.
I'm almost positive that if we could go back and look at the wide scope of things, there would be a Stephen King fan out there somewhere who would finish one of those books, close it, and look at it and go, I got that instead of the answer to the riddle. the what happened with the riddle challenge with Blaine. I read that instead. Like, come on, King.
Yeah. Because book 1 has a pretty solid ending. Book 2 does, even though it has they all have an openness to them, but there's nothing like that.
Not like 3, man. No.
Nothing like that. So that would probably be the golden example to look at.
Or 5.
Yeah, but I think pretty much people knew that he was writing and publishing them all in that period, right? Because they all came out within
it's
a year
little bit
of
different
each other.
between 5 and 6 because they were really close together. But I mean, imagine if 5 hadn't had 6 ready to go.
Yeah,
I mean that wouldn't be as bad. I don't think as bad as the Blaine and the riddle contest, but I think it would still have been bad. I mean, oh my God, Susanna's gone. What's going to happen?
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely, no, totally. But yeah, that's an interesting look at the maybe another level of the Tower where, King chose not to write those last 3 books shortly after the accident. And we might be that might be a world where at this period we'd be podcasting without a book 7. Who knows?
That's no.
With the way those are spaced out, man, let's just say 2012 was a time that he came back and wrote, call it book 6. Say he wrote Wolves of Kala in 2003, and then he wrote then Song of Susanna didn't come out till 2012, given this same kind of spacing. Honestly, you might be looking at here over the last year or so may have been when he published
book 7.
If not, we were waiting for it right now.
Man, could you imagine if we were doing a podcast and we got a new book?
Yeah.
I'm still waiting for us to get a new book. I'm convinced it's going to happen.
Yeah, I do think it's going to happen.
I just don't know how we're going to handle it, dude.
And I honestly think that we might be getting there, man. Just looking at this, because I just have it on a spreadsheet, so I'm just kind of looking and having the spacing to kind of see whatever. Now, and I'm kind of seeing the spacing since the last Dark Tower book, man. You're talking 2012. You're talking let's see, Dark Tower was 63, and then The Outsiders number 72, so you've got a chunk of books there that's been written.
We're ripe and primed for the Battle of Jericho Hill.
Yeah, I'll take it next week.
Next week, King announces the Battle of Jericho Hill to be published at the end of 2019. What would you do?
Yeah, 2019. It's a perfect year. Come on now.
19.
Yeah, exactly. You're not going to get that chance again.
Right?
It's going to be 100 years before you get another 19.
Right.
So we demand it.
Make it so, number 1.
No, I don't want to turn into the Game of Thrones fans. I mean, no. I feel for those people, I really do. But at the same time, sometimes I hear them talk and it makes me mad. I'm like, really, guys? He's giving you a lot. You're really going to be that shitty towards him? But
patience, young ones, patience.
Yeah, we'll definitely have patience. But yeah, I will definitely take another stake.
I also give them a pass because I haven't read the books, and I'm in the same camp as Tad here. I'm not going to read the books for Game of Thrones until after
the last
all of them are published. Because
yeah.
I'm not doing that to myself.
Yeah, I'm not a masochist. I don't want
I'm not I learned my lesson with Firefly. I'm not doing that anymore.
I'm that way with TV shows a lot. There's a lot of times I don't like jumping on shows early because I've been in that boat where I kind of dig a show and then it gets canceled and whatever. So yeah,
we talked about this not on the book club, but the one before that. Hannibal was the last one that got you. You're like, oh, it's got 3 seasons. I'll start watching it. You watch it, get caught up, and it gets canceled. You're like, God damn it.
Yeah.
King, damn it.
All right. So now it's kind of funny because this is not necessarily totally related to what we were just talking about, but this article that wanted to cover is, I just realized too that the slideshow has been on. Show will begin momentarily. Sorry about that, guys. Whoops. See, you get so into the conversation though, because usually as I'm doing the intros when I change that, but this conversation came out fairly quickly right out of the intros. Yeah. So
hashtag Ted is terrible.
Yeah, he's sliding it in there early, yeah.
Not early. We're partway through the episode. Not as early as some of the last ones have been.
Yeah, it's true. You're not jumping on me in the intro or anything.
I could have.
Yeah, since you do just throw them out there willy nilly, there's
there's always
justification.
There's always a reason for saying hashtag Tad is terrible, and I honestly thought about doing it in the intros. Like, hey, tweet us at Dark Tower Pod. Use the hashtag Tad is terrible.
That one wouldn't count, though, right?
No, it wouldn't count because it's not actually pointing out that you did something terrible. For instance, not updating the slides, Tad.
It's academic at that point. Yeah. So, we are on Roundtable 60, if you didn't hear in the intro, and now you're only seeing the slides.
Now people are going to be like, oh, it's a live show, and they're going to unmute us, and they're going to miss the last, half hour, and they're going to be like, wait, what are they talking about?
Yeah.
Wait, I thought the show was going to begin momentarily. Come on, Tad.
Actually, you are right now to think about it. Hopefully people are listening the whole time. But yeah, if not, I honestly, there might be some precedent to that. Who knows? If so, cry your pardon. Yeah, I did forget to change the slide. We have been talking for some time now on Stephen King's Dark Tower, and also just his bibliography, which I love that word. It's a fun one.
Bibliography.
Even as a kid, when I first learned that in grade school, I always that's a fun word.
Bibliography.
It just seems so. I don't know. It seems like something a clown would say. Let's just be honest.
What?
Just it has a lot of going on in it. It seems like something like a clown would say.
Bibliography.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Oh,
all right.
I was at Utah's Comic-Con, which is now no longer called Comic-Con because Utah ruined it for everyone.
Called FanX, Tad.
It's called FanX. I was outside and seeing some of the cosplay. There was a young child in a yellow slicker.
Yeah. Did he only have one arm?
I couldn't tell from the angle I was at. But yeah, it was him, and I believe I saw a balloon not far from him. So I'm guessing it was probably a parent or something, but I was like, I like that.
If he didn't have only one arm, if they didn't chop off his other arm, that's just not dedication.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Now that could help. That could be a perfect cosplay for a kid if the kid didn't have an arm.
That would be fantastic.
That'd
for
be great.
A kid that an amputee or something like that. That would be a fantastic costume.
Yeah, I also saw, not necessarily because that kid was probably age appropriate for Georgie. I saw some other kids probably more in the realm of 12 to 13.
Yeah.
I saw two of them that were together dressed like Michael Myers. And then I saw another one a little bit later. It was Jason. I'm like, see, there is hope for the future.
Well, we're finally getting a new Michael Myers film. So
dude. Yeah, you don't have to tell me, man.
We're not going to start on that. Tad is a huge fan of Michael Myers, so we will not go down that road today on Dark Tower Palaver, because if we did, we would not come back out.
Honestly, if I had just a random podcast to do on average things, dude, I probably could have done 2 hours on that new trailer. That's all I'm saying.
Easy.
Because I thought about even just doing it, and even though I don't really have a place to publish the podcast, just record it for posterity.
Why not? I did notice something about that trailer. We need to talk about it after the show.
Yeah,
again, I'm not going to open that can of worms.
Yeah, especially because this is a great article. So we're going to jump over. This article is titled The Stephen King Shared Universe Ranking. So, seems like right up our alley.
Shared universe. Right? Is it talking just books, or are we doing movies too?
I believe he's mostly talking books, but it's obviously because of Castle Rock being within this realm of being really it's a creation of the extended universe, right? That's where it's born from, is the idea of there's so many of these things that intercross and interweave that we want to make a show that
they're different levels of the tower.
Yeah, so it kind of comes from that, certainly, but something like that. I was cursing Google openly, and I was told that was unwise. Okay, so now we should be back online. Let me move this over so I can see the little color thing. I have a color thing that color codes our connection. All right. That's still blinking around yellow and green. Hopefully, I think we're back. I mean, it shows we're going again. So, sorry about that, guys. We had some internet issues. I think maybe my modem needs to be reset or something, because it's kind of, I don't know. It is also getting to peak time period for internet, so I don't know if that's affecting us, but going red again right currently. Oh. Yeah, no, I to beat him, with his primary weapon system ineffective against Mr. Myers. But yeah, it's I don't know. Yeah, it's definitely one of my all-time favorite fandoms for sure. So yeah, Peter's probably wise to keep us away from such.
Let's not go down that path. There's the few things that you don't want to get Tad started on with his fandoms versus not necessarily versus the Dark Tower, but if we get him down these tangent lines, we will not get him back this episode. and just saying that Halloween and Michael Myers is one of them.
And I'm like super stoked about this new movie. So I'm like yeah, it's and it's just getting worse. It's like fever pitch at this point, and we're still like 50 days away from it. So
oh my God, you started a countdown?
Oh, I've had a countdown for 100 days now.
Good God.
Over 100 days. Yeah. I'm extremely excited. That's for sure. I don't know. Yeah, at some point, I'm considering just trying to get some kind of random show that I can just put other things out on. Because there's just times I'm just like, God, I would love to podcast about X, Y, or Z. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, even Castle Rock. To be honest, like if it wasn't for us doing this show next week, like there'd be part of me that'd be like, I want to talk about the show because it's been like there's just some cool stuff I just want to nerd out on.
Yeah,
and like. So I don't know. If I get something off the ground, I'll definitely let the listeners here know in case they're interested in me babbling about some other stuff like Star Wars, Halloween, Marvel stuff. I don't know, all kinds of stuff. But yeah, so into this article. Seeing spinning again. Oh, that was just a second. All right, cool. This is by Ben Lindbergh from The Ringer, and it was published on September 4th, 2018. And I'll go through. So like he kind of has like a little bit of an article, then he gets into the ranking part. So we'll go through that first because I think it's kind of interesting the way he frames this. He says, let's see. I'm trying to think what I left out here because I cut into the article and he's referencing something and I forgot what it was about. Oh, no, never mind. He's talking about the list that he's going to get to in a bit. He says, these 10 works are far from the only linked entries in King's universe, but if you've got the bug from Castle Rock and want to start splunking into the hidden depths of the celebrated body of work, they're essentially one of the central King's interconnected secondary universe. What are you laughing at?
Splunking.
That is a good word. I do appreciate that, and I would love to just get that into my... that thing is showing spinning on my side again. It hasn't dropped connection yet, but... it's showing spinning, and I don't like that.
It doesn't on my end.
No? All right.
Nope.
Maybe it's just my side trying to paranoid me.
Delayed. Nope. Still looking good. Ryan says he's the same as Tad on the Witcher series. Don't get him started. He can go for hours.
No, I think it's good to have those things in general. Like, no matter what it is. Yeah. I love fandom for that kind of stuff. So, yeah, and I also love that, like, even things I'm not as into, whatever it might be. Like, my cousin's huge into, like, Jason. Like, Friday the 13th. And it's like, growing up, just having that. It's like, I love Michael. He loves Jason. Like, it's just so cool that, like, you know, he loves Jason as much as I love Michael, and it's just like to have that is I've always appreciated that. So yeah, that's awesome.
So what you're saying is I need to become a Freddy fan because then we have the trifecta there.
Yeah, we never really had as many because like I mean Freddy has like 2 good movies and the rest of his are kind of Yeah, he kind of and like it's funny because they I think Wes Craven before he passed away said that he kind of credits where Freddy went with being kind of a wisecracker and stuff to like 80s action movies.
Yeah,
and like and that's the problem is it eventually got to the point where it was more about the punchline than it was about like the kills or the scares. So but premise wise, nobody beats Freddy, and I'll say that as a Michael fan. Like the premise of Freddy is the most terrifying, absolutely.
Yeah, not being able to sleep, that's just
where he comes at you in your dreams, whatever he does there will affect you. Like because you can avoid a lot. You know, don't go to Camp Crystal Lake, cool. Don't go to Haddonfield, cool. You know,
don't be related to Michael.
Don't go to like.
See, we did it. We're down the road. Why are we down this road? Go back.
But you can't do it with Freddy. He'll get you, man. Or Willie, as it were in Simpsons, obviously. With the Treehouse of Horror. Which, again, going back to the Shining thing, there is definitely a Shining episode for Simpsons.
Yes, there is. Don't you mean the Shining?
Okay, so next, or then he goes on and says, a rose is a rose is a rose, unless it appears in a story by Stephen King. And this is kind of an interesting thing that he points out here, because I don't know if I've ever thought about this necessarily. Like, obviously, like, in book, if like I saw Rose in a King book, I'd probably be thinking about Dark Tower, but I've never thought about it from the outside of like the fact that King's established like these symbols that mean things to the readers. I've never really thought about it that way, so it's kind of interesting. He says in the ultra prolific author's sprawling fictional universe, a rose is a nexus of reality growing out of a ground on the corner of 46th Street and 2nd Avenue in Manhattan. And yeah, obviously we get that, but yeah, and then he goes on and says it's completely okay and not uncommon to like King and not find it fitting, that a bodega on the real life 46th and 2nd has roses for sale. And that I grabbed a screen grab of the bodega that is where the rose appears. And it says fresh flowers, and it does indeed have roses there. So isn't that great?
Yeah.
I don't know why I've never, even for Google Maps, I've never really gone and looked at some of these locations. I don't know why I haven't. So, yeah, I'm glad that Ben in this article has pointed that out, because it is pretty awesome.
I want to do that now.
What?
Google the Dark Tower.
Yeah, I want to say that somebody's made like a because Google Maps, you can create the maps that have like points of interest. I want to say that there is a Google Maps one made for the Dark Tower series that has like a number of places to look at and stuff. So yeah, it definitely maybe we'll have to go through and look at those at some point in the future. That'd be kind of interesting. Then he says, constant readers likely make up a minority of the enormous audience that King has cultivated over the past 45 years, a period during which his estimate lifetime count of book copies sold, more than 350 million, has easily exceeded the current population of the United States. Most of King's work isn't explicitly serialized and doesn't depend on a knowledge of any other entries in his catalog. A rookie reader can dip his toe in anywhere and succumb to that narrative's riptide that keeps King veterans from escaping his pull. And I found that interesting because when I read that, I thought to myself, maybe the comic book writers can learn something from King.
Yeah.
I don't know how you would do it because comic books are inherently serialized, but I feel like every so often Marvel, DC, they always have to reboot their, like, whether it's a small character or whether they do a universe-wide reboot, chances are a lot of times they do that. It's because either they are overburdened with the backstory of the character or they want to give an entry point to new readers to be able to dive in without having all the baggage of a 40-year history or whatever. And I thought about that because when he wrote that, I'm like, he's right, though. Like, a lot of this King stuff is slightly serialized, but not in a way that you couldn't jump in and read a book without being lost. I mean, even the Dark Tower books with the arguments, you could dive in the middle and be, I mean, you might miss some of the richness of it, but you wouldn't be lost.
Yeah.
So, yeah, maybe some comic writers can look at Mr. King and see what he's doing that they're not. And then he goes on and says, because King has also created what J.R.R. Tolkien calls an ambitious secondary world, which in King's case started as a dark, distorted version of Maine that he knew and grew to encompass a universe. For readers who have followed him closely during that decade-long construction project, a motif like a rose serves as a super illusion, as Michael Collings, one of the several King scholars who've spent much of their careers indexing and analyzing King's work, calls it.
Is that one of the ones that works for the Tech Corporation?
I'm not sure. Yeah, it's but it's interesting that a super illusion, and this is where it kind of gets into what I was talking about earlier. It says, and then there's a quote from Michaelis within Ben's article, and it says, with a single image, for example, the red rose in an abandoned lot, he could bring into the story all of the power implicated in half a dozen other stories that share the same image. Collings says, and then adding it gives an amount of connection, of understanding possible ways that the story might fit into its universe, justifying and clarifying actions, characters, and landscapes. And like, I've never thought about it that way before, but it's totally right. Like, honestly, it's a shorthand, right?
Yeah.
Like in The Outsider, if there were a rose that was seen, and there's not, we haven't delved deeply into The Outsider yet. We've hyped the hell out of it because it's great. But like, if there was a rose there, it would mean something most likely. But I started thinking about it, though, on the flip side of that, as cool as that is to be able to drag in a dozen books and jam that into like the narrative of a story to help you. At the same time, that would limit King, though, right? Because he can't just have a dude that just happens to see a rose for the sake of just a rose is there. He couldn't do that. He'd have to make it another flower because a rose is too
iconic.
Yeah, it's got too much meaning built into it. So it's like, in the same way, I've never thought about a lot of this stuff in this way. But so he has the ability to do all this, but at the same time, that's also going to limit him.
Yeah.
Like he can't do that. I'm trying to think of some of the other things. I mean, honestly, could he even reference a Saint Bernard, do you think?
No.
I mean, like we saw it in Dark Tower.
Yeah.
We've heard it referenced in Castle Rock. I mean, that's not a huge spoiler. They mentioned at some point a Saint Bernard. But like King himself, I don't think that he can get away with maybe he has, maybe in some of the books I haven't read, but in general, I think he'd have a harder time pulling up like a reference to just a friendly Saint Bernard.
But, or the car that Christine is.
Yeah.
What is it, a 58 Plymouth or whatever it is?
I'm blanking on what it is right now.
Yeah,
but yeah.
But if we had one of those, everyone would be like, but the guy just wanted to drive that cool car.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Or, like even names, too. Can be an issue. I mean, think about the what is it, 70-something books the King's wrote in?
Yeah, 72.
72 novels, and he hasn't run out of names yet.
Yeah, indeed. Now with the whole Twinners thing, that's something else. But
yeah, no kidding.
But yeah, no, I find that really interesting. And then he goes on and says, it's difficult, if not impossible, to pinpoint when King started consciously creating his secondary universe. And King, who at 70 is still busy speedily expanding it, declined a request to discuss its foundations, so he couldn't get King to answer his questions. But he does have some cool people he's talking to, nevertheless. Sorry, I got an alarm going off here on my phone.
No worries.
It's silent, at least. Then he goes on and says, but elements of the intertextually crept into his output early. In his 7th novel, 1979's The Dead Zone, King has a character reference, that book Carrie, his debut novel from 1974. But Carrie and The Dead Zone don't share a reality. In the latter book, the events of the former are fiction, just as they are in ours. But then there's Cujo, King's 10th novel, which came out in 1981. Like The Dead Zone, Cujo takes place in a fictional town of Castle Rock, Maine. And more than one character from the former story is referenced in the latter, not as a figment from a book by Stephen King, but as part of the town's fictional fabric. So that's kind of interesting to kind of, especially we know in The Dark Tower, because of what he does, similar thing, right? We see the exact same thing in Dark Tower. We see a character that's ripped straight from the pages of a book as a reality, but then in the same case, that same fucking character at another point sees a book about himself and the town that he came from. So we see the same thing in the same character. But
if I remember right, Cujo and Pet Sematary share a universe. If I remember right, from the little bit that I read, because it was when I was reading it, because it was before the audiobook came out. I swear there was a passage where the old guy that lives across the street talks about a town down the way had an issue with the Saint Bernard.
Oh, okay.
And it went rabid, and I was like, holy fuck, that's referencing Cujo.
Yeah, so he's definitely done it both. I find it interesting. I can't remember if I've read The Dead Zone or not. If I have, it was a long time ago, and I don't remember much of it. I certainly don't remember the fact that Carrie was a book in the book, so that's kind of interesting, because like we know from Dark Tower, obviously Stephen King books show up, but in the early works, the fact that he's referencing his own books is fairly interesting. Then he goes on and says, Castle Rock is one of a trinity of towns that makes up most of King's Mirror Maine, along with Jerusalem's Lot, which debuted in the 1975 novel Salem's Lot, and Derry, which first appeared in 1981 short story The Bird and the Album, and went on to feature prominently in novels such as It and Insomnia.
And 11/22/63.
Yeah, I guess
don't forget that one.
This article, he definitely didn't mention it, but I think he's focusing more on the early era. But
gotcha.
I don't know.
You're right. The building of the universe is what he's focusing on. I gotcha.
Yeah, and then he says, as each of these fictional towns accumulates new narratives, it becomes more real to the readers, lending an air of authenticity to the events that occurred there. For King's constant readers, returning to a town like Derry or Castle Rock is like coming home again, albeit home where horrible happens. Oh,
I would never want to live in Derry.
Yeah. I mean, Castle Rock either, really?
No, it seems so terrible.
Yeah. And then this is a quote. It says, you have all these nodes, and all these nodes connect to these stories, says George Beam, author of the Stephen King Companion and other works. At some point, this town that we call Castle Rock reaches a critical point, a point of combustion where it literally can become alive and become consuming. And I think that is true. I feel like the ability that King has shown to revisit towns, because I feel like King is so good at building a real town within a singular book, but I feel like when you suddenly jump to a different time period in a different novel and you re-experience the town either from a different time period or a different part of the town, it suddenly makes it more real, because now it's more like like I've told people in the past, like as a history fan, like Winston Churchill, he wrote a lot, and a lot was written about him. And I think because of that, he's one of the most three-dimensional historic characters that we have. You know, it's closer in history than most, you know, other historical figures, but also with so much written about him and by him, he's three-dimensional. And because I feel like it's almost the same thing here. The more that King writes about a town, the more three-dimensional it becomes, and the more you start to know, like, and I feel like that's what Castle Rock has benefited from the TV show is that we already have this built as King fans. I had a friend last night call me and like asked me like, should I watch Castle Rock? Because she's not into like haunting stuff. Yeah. So she's like, can I watch it? I'm not really into like demonic possession stuff. I'm like, oh, you can watch it and stuff. And she's like, I'm not really a Stephen King fan. Is that going to affect anything? She's like, I haven't read a whole lot. I'm like, no, you'll be fine. Like it's all self-contained. I'm like, you're not going to notice some of the fun things that I'm noticing, but it's not going to detriment you. It's not going to be to your detriment to watching it. And like, but we'll notice like things like, oh look, there's I noticed one in one of the episodes where it wasn't even like focused on it. Just in the background, there's one of the shop names was like a King reference. I can't remember what it was. It wasn't a Castle Rock reference necessarily, but it was a reference to like, oh look, there's someone's name. I don't think it's Brodigan, but I want to say it was something in that vein though. Like it was like Brodigan's florist. Like not that that's what it was, but something similar to that where it'd be like, oh look, Brodigan. You know, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but you'll get there and you'll probably see it. Like, oh, that's
what Ted was talking about.
But no, I think that's what's cool about it though is that you get this three-dimensional aspect. I mean, so many times when I'm reading other fictional books, I feel like maybe people don't spend as much time building, and I feel like sometimes that makes me enjoy it a little bit less because it just feels more like set dressing, like you've built this fake town, like you see in the like movies about movies where you just build like, you know, like the false fronts of stores to look like a street,
right?
Like it feels like that to me sometimes when I'm reading other novels where I'm just like, I don't get a sense of this town. I don't get a sense of the overall vibe of this town. I don't get a sense of any characters that aren't directly impacted with this story. It's just it's like old video games, like when you used to play like the old Call of Duties in the early 2000s. Like there was a straight line that you went through. They may twist and turn you, but there's one path to go through that game.
You can't hop over a fence that clearly your soldier would be able to hop over, and you can't go exploring off into the French countryside or anything like that. Yeah,
but nowadays games are made in a way that's like you could explore an entire freaking city or an entire like look at GTA 5 or like upcoming
Ghost Recon.
Yeah, Ghost Recon. Like things like that. Like I feel like that's the difference between a King town that you can explore or you already have explored. So suddenly the story feels more rich. And other times I'm reading some other fiction where I'm just like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm on a train track right now, and you're not going to let me divert from this. You're not going to give me a whole lot outside of what's immediately surrounding this train. Yeah. And like there's just times that it just kind of
boxes you in a little bit.
Yeah, and it's just like just because I love world building, universe building. I love that kind of stuff, whether it be in movies or in books. So I appreciate the King does it.
Yeah, one of the other things that the King does, and it's very subtle and very easy to miss, but really, really fascinating once you pick up on it. It's something that I picked up on very early on in his books. Is there's little subtle references to other King things. I can't remember what it was. I think it might have been. Was it The Long Walk? Where they talk about it. It might have been The Long Walk because it's fresh in my mind, but it probably isn't. Is where someone's driving through Maine or going somewhere, and they're like, if I turned right, I'd end up in Derry. If I turned left, I'd end up in Castle Rock. And it's like, hey, I know both those towns.
Yeah.
You know, wait a minute. Hold up a second. I can't remember which one. I think maybe it is 11/22/63. Because that one was focused on Derry. It's one that's a little one. And I can't remember which one it is, but it's a character, and they're talking about, you know, if I go this way, I'm going to end up in Derry. But that's not where I wanted to go, or something like that. And it's just that little passing note like that.
Just a small nod.
Yeah, where it's like, even like along the three-dimensional lines of what you're talking about, it adds depth to it. It's just chink. It's another thing that goes into the bucket that makes Derry real for me, is that, oh, this character and this character and this character know about Derry.
Yeah.
You know, it's even more real now, you know?
Yeah. And I just changed the slide over to show a infographic that someone made just showing the connected Stephen King universe. And it's a two-parter slide because like it's literally so tall that like I'll jump to the next slide real quick. That like the bottom half and the top half, like it's rectangular, so it doesn't fit in these slides because it was included